Thank you for joining me for another episode of Dearly Departed Experiences of a Young Widow. I'm Ainee Lynnette Taylor, and this is the last episode of season 1 of this podcast. It has been amazing. The past 11 episodes have truly opened my eyes, and it's helped me heal. I can truly say this journey that God has given me has been a mission, and that is to help others understand grief a little bit better. I know God has given me the boldness to do this because I wouldn't do it on my own. I am used to talking about others and telling their stories as a journalist. And I've also allowed people into my life during the happy times with my husband and my family and good friends. I've allowed that time to always be available, but for my grief, that authentic and sad part of my life is something I did not plan to open up on a forum such as this. But God gave me the strength to do it. And through that, I've learned a lot about all of you who've watched, who've tuned in, who have given me feedback, and have also shared their own pain and their grief. That's meant so much to me in this whole process. I started the podcast on the anniversary of my husband's death so that I could share what it was like losing him. I went back to that day 3 years ago on May 25th, 2022, and shared just how it was a normal day. It felt normal, although there were things that were going on in the news that both pained us because we saw so much tragedy and hurt in others. And I could see in my husband's face just how affected he was by it. And some stress, along with trying to hurry to get to an appointment on a heart that had already been operated on and a heart that was an AFib. It was too much. As he made it to the dentist's office, but they saw he was in cardiac arrest and he passed away there. So I shared that story, and I talked about how the difficulties of not only just losing him, but the legalities of things, trying to get his death certificate, and how I had to fight to even get the primary care doctor to sign off on his death certificate because he died outside of a hospital facility and he wasn't declared dead by a medical examiner's office official. So all of those things brought me back to a place that I didn't want to revisit because it was so painful. But thankfully, God gave me the strength to talk about those things, which opened the door for all of you to reach out and give me comfort in your words, but also share your pain. And so I wanted to go over some of the things that people mentioned to me through social media about the grief that I talked about. I thought it would be maybe a few people, if any, that would watch, family, friends. But I found that there were more people viewing it and sharing it. And I thank you for that. I had people reach out and say to me that they felt the podcast was powerful, it was inspirational, and it was also heartfelt. And that meant a lot to me to hear that, only because I wouldn't do it on my own. I keep saying that God gave me the strength and the boldness to do this. So one of the things that people would talk to me about, they would have questions. And those questions I thought were very interesting. And I wanted to talk about those because I felt it was good to share it with you. I mentioned in one of my podcasts, I talked about how I could continue to smile. I could continue to go to work. I could talk to people. I could have conversations and even sometimes jokes. But then go home and feel so inconsolably sad because I would walk into the house. It was empty. It seemed like it was normal on the outside, but when I walk through the doors and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's right. And it's not that I forgot. It's just when everything else goes back to normal, in a sense, I wanted to get back into some sense of normalcy. So it was the routine you try to get back into. And part of that routine is coming home and seeing my husband there. And when I'd open the door and realize he wasn't, it was like a reminder my life had changed forever. And I had a friend mention, like, how do we split our lives like that. Just when you think about it in the sense of you're living almost like a double life, as if you're an imposter because you walk out your door to do the everyday things that everyone else is doing. Life is going on for them. Your life has paused. It feels as if you're in the same spot from the day you found out your spouse died. And yet everyone else is going on their merry day. And it's not that they forgot you, but they also have other things in life to deal with that our pain, our grief is not the first thing on their minds. But they may come around and go, oh, I need to check in and see how they're doing. But they're going on with their everyday lives like they should. So when I read what my friend wrote to me about living a double life, it made me think, are we in survival mode? And the answer to that is yes. When this comes about, just like with my husband's death certificate situation, I didn't have time to even grieve. I was now in work mode to not only get the death certificate for my household, but to help other families that had the same situation where they couldn't get a death certificate signed so it could go to the state in order for them to receive benefits like life insurance. So they couldn't bury their loved ones, and there were people who had their deceased loved ones literally on ice because they couldn't do anything without that death certificate. And so I went into work mode, and I felt God knew that's what I needed. I would need something to keep my mind occupied instead of focusing on my loss. And in that became advocacy to help others. And that's just right up my alley. That's what I aspire to do in life, is to make someone else's life better, and to go to the state legislators and the General Assembly making changes so that death certificates could be expedited and not hold up a family who's already going through the unimaginable grief. That this was an opportunity to then get every medical professional on the computer system that the state had implemented literally in 2021. They gave all of these physicians a year, maybe even more, if I recall. I think it was right before the pandemic, to be honest. They gave more time for them to adjust. And in rural areas, they even gave more time, but the deadline had come up the same month my husband died. So that was something I felt God gave me a mission to do, and it took my mind off of how sad and how depressed I was getting. And to be able to create change, thanks to the General Assembly, specifically Senator Candy Smith, who stepped up in the gap for me. So survival mode to me was all I had. And to be able to communicate and go out and function with others is important. It was important to me to stay with friends and family and not always have them look at me like, is she about to cry? Is she about to break down right now? Should we do something? You know, I didn't want that feeling. I didn't want anyone to feel that way. And for me, that was almost shielding others. I was thinking of them more than I was thinking of myself. I had my private time in my house to fall apart, but I was not going to fall apart in front of people if I could help it. So that's where I feel like survival mode definitely kicks in, and that is common. Another interesting perspective and question that I was posed was from friends who were with someone for a very long time. They were engaged to get married, never got married before that significant other died. And the question was, would I be considered a widow? And I said, that's a great question. Legally, they'll say no. You're not a widow because you're not able to take on the responsibilities and role as a wife and benefits unless they are specifically signed over to you would not automatically go to you. And sometimes family, especially of the one who died, will not respect that the fact you were engaged. They would only respect it if you all were married. And so my answer to her was, you are a widow at heart because you were already committed and planned on spending the rest of your life with someone. Just like I went before God and had a minister talk about our vows, and we vowed to God to be together until death do us part. But my heart was already there. Once we were engaged, my heart was there. And just like these women who were engaged to the ones that they lost, I said, you're a widow at heart, and I think you should always refer to yourself as a widow. I feel it's fair because your pain is no less palatable than someone who was married. You were committed in that relationship, and you lost someone very close to you that you look to join and take their last name. And so I found that to be a very interesting question, because for them, the pain wasn't just losing the spouse or losing their fiance. It was feeling as if you were not significant in that situation as well. As if the respect level went down because you didn't have their last name. And I find that to be crazy. So taking off that, letting people know I'm a widow at heart, while we never made it down the aisle, we were engaged and committed to each other like husband and wife, and losing him has felt just the same, I am pretty sure, as any wife who lost their husband. And I hope that shuts down anyone who would look down on someone who did not get married and they lost the love of their life. Another question is how life continues and you feel so stuck. And feeling stuck is a continual issue that I also deal with. I feel I'm going forward, and then grief triggers kick in, and then I'm just sitting there and I'm mulling over how my life would be different. I mull over how life has changed so drastically for me now. And then there's the pressures of what you need to do to take care of everything in your household when you and your spouse did it together and now you're on your own. All of those things come to mind, and it's hard. Sometimes it's paralyzing when you feel the weight of the world on top of your grief on your shoulders. And so when you're in those moments of feeling stuck, it's good to recognize it. It's also good to think about it and sometimes talk about it with others, because you need an outlet. I needed an outlet, even when I was fearful of having conversations with others for the fear they may think I'm weak. And I didn't want anyone to feel as if I was so depressed that I would need help. But in all honesty, I did. I needed some help. And resources that are out there. I went to Grief Share. I went through a life group about grieving spouses or grieving widows specifically at my church. And I talked to other widows so that I could also feel some sense of normalcy in my sadness. And so I was grateful for any and everyone who just said, I know what you're going through. And even if it was a simple, hey, I'm just going to be there for you, it meant so much to me. And I talked about that in another podcast about what it means to help someone grieving. The hardest part is people would say things to help console you, but in actuality, it almost felt as if it was a blanket phrase and it didn't necessarily help in that situation. And I did bring that to light, not to shame anyone or make anyone to feel bad because they said something that I mentioned, but I realized I did the same thing because I had never been in a place where I was grieving so deeply. I've had loss, but losing my husband was a different type of grief. And so I would say the same things that I found when people would talk to me, and I'd go, wow, I've said the same thing, but I didn't realize how it seems insensitive at times. And not that they meant to. So I decided to talk about that in the podcast, and I received comments about that too, where people almost wanted to apologize. And I was like, oh, please don't do that. I don't want you to apologize. But they also felt it was good to have that acknowledgement and to realize, wow, I may have been saying what seems sincere, like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And while that is truly a word of comfort and what they're feeling at that moment, and anyone, and I've said it, I'm so sorry for your loss. When I would hear it, it made me feel as if they did it. Did you kill my husband? I would say, like, did you do it? You didn't. So don't feel sorry. But what they were sorry for is that I was in pain. And I would always remember that and never hold it against anyone. But I vowed never to say that to anyone because that is a common thing to say. And it flows almost like if you were just saying, hi, how are you doing? When really we're just saying that to get a very simple response and not the true feelings where someone would go, girl, I'm so glad you asked me how I'm doing today. And they go into a 20-minute conversation with you. And you're just thinking, I was just in passing. I just wanted to hopefully you're going to say I'm fine and I could keep moving. So I looked at some statements from another grief group, and I was very appreciative of the things that I felt were the sayings that work, the sayings that are actually perfect, if there's a way to be perfect in grief. And I'm going to give you a few of them so that it can help you if you know someone who's going through the process. So one of those statements I think is great is if you see someone and talk to them, to tell them, I don't know what to say, but I'll listen. I had so many friends who did that. I don't know what to say, but I'll just sit here. I don't know what to say, but I'm going to just hug you. I don't know what to say, but I'm going to hold your hand. Eventually, I talked, and they listened and then had a conversation. And that was therapeutic. And there are times, and I always talked, but there are times that people won't talk, and they just sit there and let their friend or family member be there for them. I think that is key. Something else to say is you may never get over it, or you'll never get over it, but you will get through it. That type of reassurance in grief is helpful. You'll know, I may not get over this, because statements were made to me about, oh, when are you going to get over this? And I thought, I don't know if I will. Or should I get over it? And what does getting over it look like? Because I didn't know. And I know they didn't know either. So to say something like, oh, get over it. You should be over it by now. Those are definitely statements that can trigger someone to the anger level of grief. And you never want that fury. Something else I thought was great to say is, I can't possibly understand how you feel, but I'm here. We know when we talk to our friends and family, they most likely lost someone in life too. And they'll say, oh, I know exactly how you feel. And when you put exactly on that statement, it would sometimes trigger me too. I don't think anyone ever could understand exactly what I was going through because I didn't say exactly what I was going through. If it was just losing my husband, that's one thing. But losing my husband and then his extended family and having them not particularly care for me and think that I was doing something to them in the midst of their grief too, it was difficult. And then trying to figure out, how am I going to maintain life? I still have to live. And I'm not in the best position right now as I'm an entrepreneur. There were so many facets that I don't think anyone could exactly know. what I was going through, but I know they were empathizing with me. And so, again, never took it personal, but I understood they were trying to relate so that we could have a conversation. But then that conversation may turn into, when my friend died, when my brother died, sister died, mama died, daddy died, when my dog died, when it becomes those stories, unless it's solicited, I find those to also seem as if we're trying to one-up each other with grief. Oh, your grief is worse. Now I'll console you. And that's not what the grieving person needs. Another couple of statements is to say, it's okay to not be okay. I love that statement. When I hear people talk about that in just general life, it's okay to not be okay. Another reassuring thought, something that helps you. To tell people it's okay to hurt and don't hold back the tears. Not that you're giving them permission to cry, but you're letting them know it's okay too. Some people just feel like I gotta be stoic and I must keep my head up and my chin up and I must just plow through life. When really it's just cry, get it out. Don't hold on to it because bitterness can set in. And I know I prayed against it. And thank God I was not bitter about all of the things that were going on in life. One thing that I also felt was helpful, besides just statements, was when people would write me or send me cards or text and tell me about a memory they had of my husband, Frederick. Those meant so much to me because it put a smile on my face on how he impacted someone else's life. To see that they had positive memories of him that they wanted to share meant so much. Even if they said something as, oh, when he was my professor, or I remember when he would speak French to me, or I saw him in the grocery store, because he was in the grocery store a lot. He loved to go to the grocery store. And if they saw me in the grocery store and they said, oh, he was so focused on what he was doing, he didn't even see me, and I was yelling his name. And that was the kind of fun things that I would laugh about, because I'm like, yeah, that's him. And it made me feel a closeness, once again, to not only my husband's memory, but that he's had such an impact on this world beyond me and his children and family. He had people who also held him and his wonderful personality and his extreme intelligence to heart. And it meant a lot to hear people give me memories. And so as I looked at different websites for grief, one of the things that they mentioned is, for most folks, to help them cope with grief is just let them know that you're a supportive presence. All you have to do without saying anything, because many times there are no words, but your supportive presence is what truly touches someone who's grieving. Calling is great. Showing up is even better. That shows you exactly where someone's heart is for you. And even those who were far away and couldn't show up for me, they found other ways to do that. And if it was a card or a gift basket or an amazing book about grief, gifts about grieving and how those gifts actually had a significant meaning to you, to me, that was precious. And it showed how much they cared for my husband and for me. And I can't thank Ainee, if you're listening, I can't thank you enough. And you know who you are. You know who you are. But I just want to recap that these episodes not only became therapeutic for me, but I see they became therapeutic for others. That the purpose of it showed up in how God put me in a place where I can then freely talk about the loss and what I learned. And one of the biggest lessons is forgiveness and forgiving yourself and saying what you may be going through is normal and that you should give yourself. And one thing you should do is say to yourself, be kind to yourself as you are kind to others. We can beat ourselves up. And I had guilt, unexplainable guilt, as if I could have done something. And I thought about, could I have stopped it? Could I have seen the signs that he was in distress. Is there anything I could have done? And then there's that guilt that sits on you. And I realized maybe there's nothing I could have done, because God already knows our time and when it's up. And I just needed to accept what I can't figure out or understand. There's certain things that are not for our understanding now. And I just had to let it go and let the guilt go. And then forgive myself, forgive those that I believe left, those who did not want a relationship after my husband's death. And I had to move on. I had to forgive people who took advantage of me. I had to forgive when there were situations that came up and they didn't think about I was still in pain. Even after a year, they're like, "Oh, you're still in pain? I didn't realize." I had to forgive that, because the bitterness is something I did not want to harbor in my heart. But I do want to leave you with this as we finish out this first season. And I will be back for a second season to kind of keep you up to date on the new things that are going on in my life and the nuances of things that I didn't expect. And so I want you to, one, not forget to journal, okay? And I have my journal, Dearly Departed, Experiences of a Young Widow. And this book has pages on pages of what you need to do to check in with yourself and also affirm. And thanks to all of those who purchased this on Amazon or purchased it here in person, because I wanted them to have affirmations. And these affirmations I've heard from several people. These affirmations, it has given them purpose. It has given them a sense of happiness. It's helped them cope with their grief, depending on what it is. It was giving them an opportunity to see that life is still worth living, and they have so many things to be grateful for than they don't. And I appreciate those who purchased the book, the journal, and are using it, because I want you to use it, and that's important. I also want you to know there is a crisis hotline and a suicide hotline, and all you have to do is dial 988. It gets you to any crisis hotline in the country. And if you're in need, reach out. If the sadness is overwhelming you and overcoming you, and the depression sets in, because depression is a little bit different than grief, I would say reach out to someone and talk. You need to have someone who can listen and help you get through. You should never stay stuck. You should be able to then get back into some sort of routine or finding a new one. And even I've heard from specialists to do a ritual of, if it's a ritual to look at your old wedding album, pictures, memories that you all have right before you go to sleep, or maybe even when you get up in the morning, so you still feel close to that loved one. There are ways to cope, but staying in a sense of despair, hopelessness, and depression is not normal. And that's the one thing about grief. There's nothing that's normal, but the one abnormal thing is if you feel like you can't live anymore. And I would suggest getting help. I would say go to griefshare.org and find a grief share group near you. My group was amazing, and there are groups all over the country. And it's a 13-week program, and it walks you through how to get through. And we know grief never goes away, but it does subside so that you can function and keep living. I suggest doing those things. And if all of the things I mentioned, whether it's a group in church, a support group for grief, or the crisis hotline, think about getting a therapist. And there's no stigma if you need one. I believe if you don't get a therapist, it's worse. Especially if you're feeling that everything you're doing is not getting you back into the world of the living and bringing you some sort of happiness. I tell people I may not be happy all the time, but I definitely have joy. And I have joy because of the fact that God is in my life and He has always shown up. And He's always been there when I needed Him. And I can't thank Him enough for how He has covered me and kept me where I am today. I think life could have been I couldn't even tell you how life could be worse. The worst of things was losing my husband. That's what I felt. But then my life changed. I didn't ask for it to change. I felt a little slighted. I was angry. I had so many emotions and feelings. But the fact that the Lord wrapped His arms around me and He sent His angels on earth to come and console me. All of my friends, my family, all of them became my angels on earth and took me in and showed me how loved I am. And I hope you know that love of God and that love of Christ. If you don't, reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you get there. So thank you for watching now the 12th episode of this season. I'll be back in the new year to tell you more about what's going on, the things I've had to navigate through, and even starting to date and find love again. Thank you for joining me for this first season of Dearly Departed, Experiences of a Young Widow. I look forward to seeing you again. And please share this, especially anyone you know that is grieving. Let them see this and reach out to me. I'll be happy to help in any way I can through God's grace. Take care until we see and talk again.